Hi, Mr. Phillips here. Hope everyone's doing okay. This video is on basslines, and there's quite a lot of audio files in it that I've taken, well, the MP3s and things that I've included. So this isn't going on the YouTube channel. This is I'll probably send via Glow to help avoid any kind of copyright infringement. Um, Please go and by all means, go and have a listen to the actual tracks. I've got a few extracts in here which are to demonstrate points, but please go and listen to the actual pieces of music, or even when you're just listening to your own music, have a think about the bass lines and the concept that we'll kind of talk of in this lesson. Right, we're going to start off. We've got an introduction from a bassist called Victor Wooten, who is going to play a piece called "You Can't Hold No Groove." So this is just solo bass guitar. Hello S3, welcome back. Today we're looking at writing bass lines. So we're going to take a little bit of a look at the function of a bass line, what is the purpose. We'll recap some of the steps to write good bass lines, but the main point of this video is going to be to look over a few different examples of bass lines, and we'll kind of look and see what the composers have done. So let's get started. So why is it important to have a bass line? Well, firstly, a bass line gives you a balanced frequency span, which basically means that you have, along with your high sounds, which is where the melody tends to be the main tune, you also have some low down sounds. Now, it's really important in music that you have this mixture, otherwise it tends to kind of feel very, very tense. So, for example, if you're watching a horror film and you've got very, very high pitched sounds with no low sounds to kind of balance it out, it can start to feel very kind of tense and eerie. So it's important in music to have that kind of balance to create a good feeling. The bass line does tend to be the foundation of the music, and it tends to provide a really strong kind of pulse, which everything else is kind of layered on top of. It also really kind of sets out what the harmony or the chord progression is, so it tells you that progression, and the rhythm in particular, and some of the little ornamental notes that the bass player will normally add in will add a lot of rhythm and energy to the music. In terms of writing bass lines, the four main things that I'd say are most important are: number one, using root notes. We said previously that one of the main functions of a bass line is to set out the harmony so that the audience can hear the chords move. The easiest way to do this is to use those root notes, and it allows you to use the other instruments in whatever ensemble you're writing for to add in the other notes in the chord. Step two, starting to add chord tones. Obviously, if you're just using those root notes, it tends to get a little bit boring, so you add the chord tones in to provide a little bit of variety. We'll look at some examples of that. Step three, filling in the gaps. If you're just using your chord tones, you tend to have some large intervals, which you might want to keep to a minimum maybe. So a good example of this is a walking bass line where all those gaps are filled in, and the bassist will have some very, very, very smooth lines that move in a stepwise fashion. And then number four is having a solid rhythm. So we said previously that a lot of energy comes from the bass line. The having that interesting rhythm, or it might just be a very, very simple rhythm, but having that really strong pulse is really important in the music. Okay, so time to start looking at some actual bass lines then. So number one is going to be All About That Bass by Meghan Trainor. Now, I thought this was going to be a good place to start, mainly because of the title, but anyway, let's have a look. So if we have a look here, we've got three different chords. So we're starting in A, moving on to B minor, moving on to an E chord, and then finishing back on A. So three different chords, but it's in a series of it's in an eight bar section. So looking at these, if you have a listen to the tune, which I'll play for you in a minute, each section is very, very kind of similar. It follows the same pattern, follows the same basic shape, and you can see that one of the features here is that we start on the root note. So if on section one we're starting on an A and we're finishing on an A, In the B minor section, we're starting on a B, finishing on a B. In the E major section, we're starting on an E and finishing on an E. And then in the last A section, same again, we're starting on an A and finishing on an A. So that point of having that really kind of strong and pronounced root note is really kind of demonstrated quite well here. Have a listen.
Because you know I'm all about that bass, no trouble. I'm all about that bass, no trouble. I'm all about that bass, no trouble. I'm all about that bass.
Another thing this bass line does really well is that you've got really good use of the chord tones in the music. So if we look at this, the first section here in A major, you're starting off on A. You've got a C sharp and an E later in the phrase, but we've also got this C here, the C natural, which is a flat third. So we've got 1, 3, 5 from our chord. We've got those chord tones, but we've also got this flattened third here. So it's a C natural in this instance, which kind of makes it sound a little bit funkier, a little bit smoother, a little bit more interesting. So that's quite a good feature, and it does that on most of the sections here. Example 2 is going to be Praise You by Fatboy Slim. Now this is a really, really good solid bass line that uses chord tones really well. So the chords are actually F sharp, C sharp and G sharp, which are, well, it's a lot of sharps. So we're going to take it down a semitone, and we're just going to think of that as being F, C and G. So same chord progression, we've just moved it down ever so slightly. It's much easier to look at. So if we have a look at the lower line here, that gives us this chord progression. So F, C and G. In our F chord, we're just using in the F chord, we're using F, A and C, which is just the chord tones number 1, 3 and 5. In the C chord, same thing again, we're using notes 1, 3 and 5, starting on that root note number 1. And then in the G chord lasts for a whole bar, so it's slightly longer. So this is moving up the scale now, effectively. So we're starting on 1, moving up to number 3, then we're adding in a 4, adding in a sharp 4 before going to D, which is number 5. So it's adding in those extra notes, filling in the gaps. Next example we're going to look at is This Is the Place by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. So we've got a 4-bar chord progression here starting on A minor, so A minor, F, D minor and C. They start to get a little bit more adventurous now. So instead of just using the chord tones, we're kind of adding in a few extra different notes. So in the A minor bar, you can see that we're using the root note, note 1, up to note 3, totally normal so far. But then we go down to the G, which is the 7th note in that chord. So that's a little bit of a funny sound. But the reason that they've done that is that G leads brilliantly onto the F, which is the first note of the next bar. So they're kind of using that 7th to fill in the gaps. So in the F bar, we're using notes 1, 5 and 3, so just normal chord tones. Go to D minor bar, and that's 1, 5 and 3 again, so that is completely standard. And then on the last bar, the C major bar, we're using 1, 5 and 2. So that D just adds a little bit of flavor. It's actually kind of leading you on to the A minor bar. It gives you a little bit of a different feel back towards that A minor. So they've started to be a little bit more adventurous, still mainly focusing on that root note, note 1, mainly using chord tones, but giving a few extra notes for a bit of extra flavor. We're going to stick with the Red Hot Chili Peppers for our next example, and this track is on Mercury. So again, 4-bar chord progression, B minor, G, A, and then F sharp. So this is slightly more interesting again, and they're using some really good notes to fill in those gaps and create a little bit of variety. Bar 1 is quite standard. Note 1 up to note 5. Then bar 2, our G chord, slightly more unusual, starting on note 1, so you know it's a G chord, it's starting on a G, but then we're going down to note 7 and note 6. Bar 3 on the A chord, starting on note 1, going to note 5, so bar 3 is quite standard, but then bar 4 is my favourite. It doesn't start on note 1, it starts on note 7, so it's kind of creating that almost like an illusion that you're not quite hearing that F sharp just yet. It starts on an E before it goes up to an F sharp. So it's a really kind of it delays that F sharp a little bit and just creates a little bit of, you want to hear the F sharp, your ear wants to go there, it wants to hear that F sharp, but it's not quite getting that yet. So it's just a little bit of tension by delaying that note 1. So it's a really nice bass line. Before I forget, another really good thing about this is the solid rhythm. Really helps to drive the piece forwards. Our penultimate example is Come Together by the Beatles. Now this is a really distinctive bass line. It's one of those that you probably have heard of, even if you don't necessarily know the tune. I really like this one because we're starting on, it's fairly standard, we're starting on our D and a D minor chord, so starting on note 1, up to note 3, up to note 5, but then we go up to a high note 3. So we go up to a high F in this instance. So having that large interval, if you're at the start of the bar going from a D up all the way up to a high F, that's a really kind of large jump, and the F and the A are just kind of there to fill in that gap. So it's creating quite a nice feel there by having that huge interval. But again, it's just bog standard chord tones, notes 1, 3, and 5, spelling out the chord. So really good technique there. A little bit later on, so we've got that D minor bar is repeated a few times, and then we have a couple of bars of A and a couple of bars of G. A is really simple, just using notes 1 and 3, and then G is just note 1. So really simple, but sometimes simplicity is best. And our last example for this slightly longer video than usual is Money by Pink Floyd. So again, really distinctive bass line. You probably have heard of this one. So it's a B minor chord. I've written B minor. It should really be a B minor 7 chord, which we can get into on another video. But it's using bog standard chord tones the whole way through, 1, 3, 5, apart from the A there, which is our 7th. So a really nice distinctive bass line that spells out that this is definitely B minor, which is essentially what its job is in this situation. Right, that's it from me. Hope this was useful. So just one last recap. Don't forget, when you're writing your bass lines, start with your root notes. Add a little bit more interest by using chord tones, so notes 3 and 5. Start to fill in the gaps between the notes, maybe come up with a little bit of a nice phrase using passing notes, or maybe a few chromatic notes. And then lastly, and possibly most importantly, have a really solid rhythm that helps to drive the piece and give it a lot of energy. Right, hope you found this useful. That's me. I'm going to leave you with one of my favourite bassists, actually. This is it's a bassist and singer. The singer is called Jane Monheit, but the bassist is Christian McBride, and it's an upright bass, so it's a slightly different sound, a bit more of a jazzy style. This is just phenomenal playing. The amount of detail you can hear in here is fantastic, so enjoy.
Every honeybee fills with jealousy when they see you out with me. I don't blame them, goodness knows. Honeysuckle rose. When you're passing by, flowers droop and sigh, and I know the reason why. You're much sweeter, goodness knows. Honeysuckle rose. I don't